let's talk about unit conversions. You may have also heard of this being referred to as dimensional analysis, depending on when you learned about it. And it is something that is excessively important for doing chemistry and doing the problems that are associated and getting everything into the correct units that we need, which you then obviously label your answer with. It's also a way that can help you figure out what to do when solving some problems. And this isn't true for everyone, so if this is not true for you, please don't feel like you're missing something. But the thing that tends to click in my brain when I'm doing problems is setting something up like a unit conversion or like a dimensional analysis. I can almost always find my way through solving a problem by applying the things that you'll see in here. So the relationship between units are something called that we call conversion factors. And an example of this is going to be a conversion factor that will take us from an English unit to an SI unit. 1 inch is the same as 2.54 centimeters. So both of these are lengths. If you measure this length in inches, it's 1 inch. If you measure it in centimeters, it's 2.54 centimeters. Now, writing this as a conversion factor, we use the fact that these two values are the same. So they mean the same length. So if we were to take 1 inch and divide by 2.54 centimeters, they're the exact same length. Our answer would be 1, even though it doesn't look like any of the units cancel out. And you would get the same thing if you took 2.54 centimeters and divided by 1 inch. So they're equivalencies or equalities. You might see some of those words used to describe what is going on with this conversion factor. Now, what that means is that we can use this ratio or fraction in a calculation and use it to convert from inches to centimeters or from centimeters to inches. So as an example, let's do 12.5 inches and convert it to centimeters. Again, I tend to put all of my starting points over 1 just so that things match up a little bit better. You don't have to, but if you're struggling, I suggest trying it. 12.5 inches over 1, if I multiply that by 1, which is what my conversion factor is, I'll still have the same length. So I want to multiply by a version that will leave me with centimeters. So I need centimeters in the top of the fraction. Otherwise, my answer would be 1 over centimeters. Then I don't want that. But very nicely, when I have centimeters in the top, I have inches in the bottom. So if I multiply, then inches will cancel because I'll have inches divided by inches. And then when I do 12.5 times 2.54, I get 31.8 centimeters. This type of setup works really well for multi-step calculations, and I'll show you an example of that a little bit later. If you want to look at using the other version of the conversion factor, we could take 31.8 centimeters and convert it back to inches. Now I want to end up in inches, so that will be in the top of my fraction, and I want centimeters to cancel, so that will be in the bottom. So 31.8 divided by 2.54 is 12.5 inches, which is good because I needed to end up in the same place that I was before. Now, I mentioned that this works really well for multi-step calculations. Let's look at an example. We're going to convert 1.76 yards to centimeters. We know that 1 meter is equal to 1.094 yards, and that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. Now, the conversion factor here, we'll do some more examples. You'll see a ton of examples of conversions with metric prefixes. if it makes more sense to you to write a different version of this metric prefix equality, you can. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. 100 centimeters equal to 1 meter is the one that tends to make sense to me. But if you're going off of the table that's in the equation sheet, it might make more sense to you to write that 1 times 10 to the minus 2 meters is equal to 1 centimeter, which is kind of how that table is set up. In any case, we're going to use this one in our calculation. Now, I know that I have 1.76 yards. That's where I'm starting. I'm going to put it over 1, and then I want to go from yards all the way to centimeters. Now, I only have one relationship with yards in it, and I'm going to set that fraction up so that yards is in the bottom and it will cancel, and that's just going to get me to meters. So that will take me, if I do 1 meter over 1.094 yards, yards will cancel, and then if I divided those values, I would have a value in meters. Now, you could stop here, write down your answer, and then do the next step. Totally fine. If you want, you can also continue to set this up as a big, long conversion. So I'm going to do that here and then show you how to account for the numbers. So I'm now in meters, and I want to go to centimeters. So my conversion factor will have centimeters on the top and meters on the bottom, so that meters cancels, and I would be left in centimeters, which is where I want to end up. So this is good. This is the last conversion factor that I need. Now, I've got a bunch of numbers here. To make sure that I don't miss anything, the way that you solve this, the multiplication and division that you're doing, is you multiply everything across the top and then divide by everything across the bottom multiplied. So across the top, I have 1.76 times 1 times 100. So I'm going to put 1.76 times 100 in parentheses. And on the bottom, I have 1 times 1.094 times 1, so just 1.094. This would give me 160.8775 centimeters. Now, let's add some sig figs to it. If I were asking you to report this with the correct number of sig figs, my starting value has 3 significant figures. My conversion factors are exact numbers, so I don't have to worry about any of them, which means that my answer should have 3 significant figures. So I would report this as 161 centimeters. Let's do a second example, and this one is a little more challenging because we're going to convert with a volume value. So volume, we've got 3 dimensions for volume, right? You'd have to do you have to have something that's cubic, or you have to have something that is explicitly expressing volume, like liters, which is a volume unit. We're going to convert 5.70 liters to cubic inches. There are a few conversions that we know. So liters, we know we could get from like liters to milliliters. That doesn't feel like it's going to help us, but we're going to have this written down here anyway. And then the other thing that we're going to put in here, inches. I do know a conversion that goes to inches, which is 2.54 centimeters. And then the missing connection between all of this is knowing that 1 cubic centimeter is the same volume as 1 milliliter. This will be on the equation sheet, but this 1-to-1 conversion is extremely important, and you will use it all of the time. So this seems okay. I'm starting in liters. I know I can get to milliliters. I know that milliliters will take me to cubic centimeters, and then I have to figure out how to deal with the cubic portion of this, but I can go from centimeters to inches. So 5.70 liters, The conversion factor I need is 1,000 milliliters over 1 liter so that my liters cancel. And then 1 cubic centimeter over 1 milliliter, so milliliters cancels. Then I have cubic centimeters and I want to go to cubic inches. I can accomplish this with the 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters conversion if I cube that conversion. Now, I will do an expanded version of this for you in a second so that you can see exactly why we're cubing it. This is the number one error that I see for students when doing unit conversions like this. So please watch out for cases like this to make sure that you've accounted for all of the pieces. So if I cube the conversion factor, then centimeters cube will cancel and I'll be left with inches cubed. This would give me 347.84 cubic inches. If you're having trouble getting that number, what you'll see in the expansion is that you have to do in the denominator of this calculation 2.54 times 2.54 times 2.54. Right, so if I expand this out a little bit, 1 cubic centimeter, that's really 1 centimeter times centimeter times centimeter, right? That's the meaning of cubic centimeters. So if I use the conversion 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters, that only cancels 1 of my centimeters. So if I were to stop here and just use it, I would be left with centimeters squared times inches, which doesn't make any sense. So I have to do the conversion 2 more times for a total of 3 so that all 3 centimeters cancel. And then what I have across the top is inches times inches times inches, which is cubic inches.